Hello, hello, everyone. It's nice to see you all. We have a very special masterclass today. We're talking about maximizing profits from secondhand book sales. And we have a special guest today that's from a Goodwill organization, which I'm looking forward to sharing with you shortly. So it's going to be a 25-minute panel today with 5 minutes more at the end for additional questions or follow-up questions that you might have. So the chat is on. So everyone, let us know where you're tuning in from. I'm tuning in from Greenville, South Carolina, and I'm in all caps. And just make sure you've switched your chat on to everyone so we can see those chats coming through. So we've got Lori. Hello. It's another name buddy from Pennsylvania in Erie. We've got Ginger from Lincoln, Nebraska. Nicole in Indianapolis. Fabulous. It's awesome to see you all here. Thanks so much for joining us. Great. So we've got a few folks here today joining us. So Jake, I'll allow you to introduce yourself first.
Hey, I'm Jake. I've been with Neatoscan for about 13 years now. I've been doing a lot of the client onboarding and getting the accounts set up, and I work a lot with the repricing rules and just helping people, figure out, better ways to work on their business and doing whatever I can to do, whatever I can do to help out with that. It's kind of where I'm at. So.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for joining us, Jake. And our special guest, Sam Thompson. So why don't you introduce yourself to everyone?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm the executive e-commerce and marketing manager for the Portland, Oregon Goodwill. I've been here for about 3 years, and I was at another e-commerce company for about 10 years before that. And just to clarify, in my role, e-commerce is really split up into 3 different departments. So we've got what we call collectibles. Lots of Goodwills are doing the same thing. So that's things like antiques and jewelry and artwork, toys, clothing, all that. Books, which is what we're here to talk about. And our Goodwill agency sells books on 5 different marketplaces. And that leads to the 3rd department that I oversee, which is goodwillbooks.com. So that's a marketplace that our Goodwill owns and operates for other Goodwills to sell books and media items online.
Wonderful. I'm so excited to have you both here. I actually went to Goodwill Portland, Oregon, I think it was November or December last year. Yeah. And Sam's warehouse is among the cleanest warehouses I've ever seen. It is so, and the lean methodology y'all are using, I'm just so excited to chat.
Yeah, awesome.
Great. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Lori. I'm the Vice President of Customer Experience. So I oversee the support teams and the services teams on the collectibles and book software. So I'm always here to help. Little fun fact about myself and why I am passionate about books is that I've actually published my own book. So I know a lot of the nuances of the FBA, FBM on Amazon, and also building my own Shopify store as well. But I'm not here to share much. I've got my 2 experts with me who are our panel guests today, and they're going to be going through a few different things today. So we're going to talk about optimizing operations, some common operational mistakes, some common software mistakes that we see, opportunities for improvement, and we're also going to touch on a few of the different marketplaces that you might be able to list to, or just explain a little bit about how you may be wanting to set up your account or books operation. So let's get into it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share a question, and Sam and Jake will both respond to the question, but I will just be bringing down the screen share while they're answering the questions and then bringing them back up. So hopefully remember the questions, or maybe Joe will pop them in the chat. So our first question of the day is, when thinking about books profitability, what are you trying to optimize for? Sam, could you go first with this one?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're trying to find the sweet spot between top line sales and bottom line profit. So that's both the profit margin percentage as well as the just number of actual dollars that you're driving to the bottom line. So if you have a 99% profit margin, which would be amazing, but you only sold one $10 item, your margin, that percentage is great, but you're just not driving enough revenue to actually have a profitable department.
Absolutely. That profit margin is so important. What are you seeing for the optimization piece for profitability on your end, Jake?
So one of the things that you want to think about is touches. And I'm not just talking about inside of our software, but just in the general lifespan of that book or item. How many times are you touching it from the time it comes into your shop at the store how many people are touching it and moving it around at that store before it gets shipped over to the central facility. And again, throughout the entire process, even if it's going to go into your store for, to get sold there instead of online, you still want to think about the touches that you're doing there to move it out onto the shelves, shuffling it around while it's out there, and then again to pull it off if it doesn't sell out there. So, and then inside of our software, we are touchscreen compatible. It's a little thing that a lot of people don't take advantage of. With the cordless hand scanner in a stand, you can actually, have your hands completely free with the touchscreen and really kind of help out as far as those touches and things go. So kind of being mindful of that can really help you out as far as optimization and in that area anyway. So
absolutely. So it's sounding like that sweet spot of not of that top line revenue and that bottom line revenue. And even if you do have that top line number, still needing to make sure that there's margin there. And then also optimizing for those touches, because too much human touches can really bring down the profitability of an item because of those labor costs. Great. So next question. What are some of, just get this back up. What are some of the common mistakes that you see organizations making in their operational flow specifically that impacts margin? And I'll go with you first, Jake.
So one of the things I see, and this is probably more common in like some of the smaller organizations or somebody that's new to listing books, but it's when you're pre-scanning or trying to get through find those accepts versus the rejects, is you want to be very efficient with your time management. There's some books that might not scan correctly. If you think it's a book that's going to be worth a decent amount of money, it's, maybe take a second to search for it and get that book listed if it's something that looks well. There's a lot of books out there that just aren't worth that much, and you kind of probably already know it. So if it doesn't scan at that point, maybe just, pass on it, move it along. Because again, with the low profit margins in books versus like collectibles and things like that, you really want to kind of focus on the numbers and the volume that you're going through things. So you want to be mindful of how much time you're spending on some of those books that don't scan or might not have a barcode that works very well. So that was the main thing. And then one of the books I found that kind of triggers this a lot is some of the mass media books or mass market books, like the New York Times bestsellers. They have barcodes on the back that don't scan to the correct title. You have to open it up and look at the barcode on the inside and scan those types of things. So those are some of the books that you just know are not going to be worth a lot, because those mass market media books are just a dime a dozen. So don't stop and slow down. If it doesn't scan, you can do a quick scan on the inside. If it still doesn't work, then just pass on it.
That makes total sense. Having some sort of process in place for when things may be outside of the ordinary and an operation happens, so folks aren't getting hung up on stuff and not hitting those volume numbers. How about you, Sam? What are some of the common mistakes that you're seeing in terms of operational flow?
Yeah, I think we're all rightly focused on the day-to-day aspects of running a business, listing new items, making sure we're shipping orders quickly enough, things like that. But we also need to make sure that we're taking the time to analyze our business. Like, have we set up our stations and our product flow in an efficient manner so that our employees can minimize steps and touches and focus on the value generating activities? And have we analyzed our expenses, like shipping rates, packaging costs, and then optimized those to the extent that's possible? For example, based on either our shipping volume or the quantities of supplies that we're willing to order, can we negotiate lower rates? And then have we optimized the shelf life of our products so that we're spending more time on listing new products and shipping orders and less time purging items that didn't sell? Things like that.
I love those examples too, because you provided such a depth and breadth to it. It's not just the operational station and minimizing touches, but it's also looking at all of the materials you're using and have you expanded, can you negotiate, and ensuring that you're on top of like both of the top line gains that you're getting, but also all of those bottom line costs that can add up over time.
Yeah.
Great. So our next question number 3, and I do see some questions coming through via the chat. Keep them coming. We're going to get to them by the end. So if questions come up as you are watching this, please do keep sharing them. So question number 3 is, what are some common mistakes you see organizations making in the Neatoscan software? And I'll pass that to you first, Sam.
I mean, I think the first one is set it and forget it. So similar to what I said a minute ago about not being so focused on the day-to-day that you forget to analyze your results and make sure that you're still on track. I've talked to lots of people that admit that they haven't looked at their Neatoscan rules tree since they were originally set up, or maybe they're new to the department and they've never looked at them. Or maybe they've never reached out to Neatoscan to do an account review. So if your shipping costs have gone up and your packaging costs have gone up and your labor costs have gone up, but you haven't made any adjustments to your rules tree in 5 years, and then your boss asks you why your book margins have dropped, it's time for you to review your settings.
Absolutely. That's super relatable on our end. So Jake, what are your thoughts on this question specifically?
So one of the things that I've come across with some clients is they'll use too many price overrides. This typically isn't going to come up in the Goodwills, as they normally don't do it, but some of the other ones, if you're using the price overrides too often, it can actually hurt you in the long run. Sometimes you'll have to go back and then remove them. And to figure out which ones you need to remove and don't need to remove, you kind of need to research the current price, why you set that price override to begin with. And it's just a time-consuming process, especially if you're looking at a lot of price overrides that you kind of have to go through. So I would try to minimize the use of those. And if you're finding that you're using those too often, then you need to kind of adjust your rules so that they work better for you and you don't need to use those as often. And then the other thing, like this, Sam had already mentioned, is the repricing rules. That's so important. There's so many times I've come across Goodwills that, as he mentioned, they've set it and forget it. I've been keeping track of the postage upgrades since 2018. And since then, more times than not, every year, they're increasing the postage rates by twice a year, at least once a year, if it's not twice a year. And normally it's going up about 30 to 40 cents on average. So if you skip just 1 year on price updates, you're actually, potentially losing 60 to 70 cents of your profits just because the rules are not up to date. So, and most Goodwills are working off of a dollar profit margin. So 60 to 70 cents is gone in 1 year. And if it's been longer than that, then you could be selling things for a loss. So keeping those up to date and giving us a call is so important. So please take advantage of the fact that all you gotta do is pick up the phone and we'll be glad to help you out.
Absolutely. That is Jake's bread and butter. It's our bread and butter. So please do, if that's an action for each and every one of you who are listening, who maybe haven't adjusted their rules in a while, we're happy to support, because as Sam alluded to earlier, constantly iterating and adjusting things and knowing the ins and outs of your business and your margin, extremely important when it comes to profitability and the book side. Question number 4, what change have you made that's made the biggest impact on either your organizations or an organization that you've worked with in terms of books profitability? And I'll go with you first, Jake, just because you work with not just Goodwills, you work with quite a few other organizations too.
There's 2 examples that kind of come to mind. One of them is it was a new client, and when I was bringing them on board, I'd asked them, like, what did they do with their repricing rules? And they couldn't really explain it. They really weren't quite sure what was going on in there. So I ended up just kind of showing them some things that we could do, and they really liked what we had. So they started to use what we had instead. And they actually doubled their sales, from their sales before coming on board with us and afterwards. So again, those repricing rules are so important. Another situation that comes to mind is we had another client that decided that they really wanted to work off of a higher profit margin, so that they're doing less work, but they're really going to get paid for the stuff that they're selling. So they were trying to get like $3 to $4 profit, and they just weren't getting enough accepts. And Sam mentioned this earlier, if you got a 90% profit margin, that's great. But if you're only getting a few accepts out of that, then that might not generate enough income, to really make yourself profitable. So there, you want to find that happy medium. And that's where, maybe instead of making that big leap, you just kind of price it out, in a couple steps and kind of evaluate along that road and finding out where that sweet spot is. So
finding that sweet spot is so important. Sam, what are your thoughts on this question?
I mean, I think our biggest thing was joining Goodwill Books. Okay, I just had to
Of
throw that
course.
in there.
Yeah.
I wish there was a silver bullet for this. I don't think there is. I think it's about, again, measuring and monitoring your results. When you decide it's time to tweak a setting somewhere, coming up with what you think the expected results will be. Like, I'm going to change this, which I think will increase my top line sales, or I'm going to change that, which I think will increase my profit margin, whatever that change is, and then monitoring the results of the change that you made. Did it meet your expectations? Did it exceed them? Did it come up short? And then operationalizing that so that it's not just something that falls by the wayside.
I love that process, like setting a hypothesis, implementing it, assessing it, and if it meets your expectations, operationalizing it. I'm struggling with words today, aren't I? I love that flow, Sam. Great. And speaking of Goodwill Books, when speaking about profitability, how do you decide which marketplaces to sell on? And because you just mentioned it, Sam, and I know you do use a few marketplaces over in Goodwill Portland, what's your methodology and thoughts on this specifically?
Yeah, I love this question. So I think it'd be easy to say that you should only sell on the marketplaces that drive the most sales, or you should only sell on the marketplaces that have the lowest fees. But it turns out those are not always one and the same. And you just said this, and I mentioned earlier. So in Portland, our Goodwill, we sell on 5 different book marketplaces, and they all have different fee structures, and they all drive different levels of sales for us. So we've tried to find the right balance of, again, top line sales and bottom line profitability. And as is probably the case with most of us here today, the marketplace that drives our highest sales has the highest fees, but we don't want to walk away from those sales. So we try to balance that out by also driving sales on our marketplaces that have lower fees for us. And I will take a moment just to mention, again, with Goodwill Books, if you are a Goodwill, we have low fees, so that helps drive more money to your bottom line. But I think about all of this like baking a cake. These different marketplaces with their different sales and their different fees, those are the ingredients that help us succeed.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that. It's so true. Often those ones with the highest sales also have the highest fees. So diversifying is so important. And I think you've got a bit of data on this, Jake, and you've taken a bit of dive on the different marketplaces. So what are your thoughts on this questions with regards to which marketplaces folks can utilize for profitability?
So yeah, so this is something I was a little surprised on. Yeah, I did do a little bit of a dive on some numbers, but before talk about those real quick, the thing I want to mention is, there's some websites out there that there's some people out there that they want to go out there and just get on every single marketplace that they can immediately. And sometimes that's not always the best approach. There are some websites that charge you a monthly fee, whether you sell 1 item or 1,000 items. So you want to make sure that, you look at those fees and understand them before you start pushing all your product to some of these websites. But generally, I do think that, you want to get out there and get that exposure, but you want to make sure that your sales, are going to help you out and not cause you to lose money on some of those things with the monthly fees. There's some trends that I've noticed. So I was a little surprised. In the past, many years ago, I think there's, some websites made up like 90% of the sales. Now it's down to like 80% is what I thought it was. But right now, some of the big websites out there, have dropped from like, making like 80% sales versus some of the other websites. And now I find some of the big players are out there only making like 60% of their sales when you're on all these different marketplaces. So if you're on 5 different marketplaces, the big players out there are like 60%, and the other ones are really making a lot of traction. So again, I think if you how do I say this? Well, you want to get to some of the exposure, I guess, is what I'm saying here. Try not to mention any specific marketplaces here, but yeah, you want to get some of that exposure to multiple marketplaces. I think that can really help you out because the Keen is not as big as they used to be, I guess. So
Absolutely. And it's so nice to see that, Sam, yourself, you're diversifying your base by having 5 different marketplaces that you sell to. And then Jake, the data we're seeing is that folks are starting to diversify more, especially those with a lot of top line sales, at least on the Neatoscan. And we don't know all of the ins and outs of your profitability margin and such, because we're not in your business as much as what you are. But certainly if you want more information on fee structure, we're seeing when to expand into a specific marketplace. That's where calling our support team comes in. We're here to support you, and we want to help you expand to marketplaces that make sense for your operation. Before we jump into the questions, there's quite a few via chat, some for Jake, some for Sam. Is there anything else, Sam or Jake, you wanted to talk about or share with everyone? Anything that feels pertinent before we move into Q&A?
there's one thing I would mention, and for those of you that have done the onboarding that worked with me, this is slightly off topic, but since I'm talking to a lot of you and I want to bring this up. So one of the biggest mistakes I see people use in our software is on order issues and market ship errors. So if you go to the inventory screen, those are 2 buttons and they should always be zeroed out. This is the thing I stressed the most during an install, and even with me stressing it the most, it's still the most overlooked thing in our system. And generally, just to keep it short, if things are showing up there, that means you have orders that you're not fulfilling. They're going to get counted as unfulfilled orders, and it could count as strikes against your account, even lead to getting your account suspended. So please, go and look at your order issues and market ship errors in the inventory screen. If they say anything other than 0, give us a call and we'll go into in more detail on how to work through those. So
amazing. Yeah, really good call to action for everyone there. Anything you wanted to share, Sam, before we move into the Q&A?
I mean, it's maybe just a summary. I'm really curious about some of the questions, but I feel like having a goal, measuring your results, making changes as you see appropriate, reaching out to Neatoscan for help as you see appropriate, implementing those changes, and then continuing to monitor. It's just this cycle. And there's no guarantee with any of this, but if you're not doing those things, it should make you pretty nervous that maybe the results aren't what you would expect or hope to get.
Amazing. Yeah, I love that. I've noticed with the collectibles end and also the books end, the organizations that are really successful in selling a lot of items, they're not afraid to iterate, but they always know their business and they're always looking at the data as well. So I just love that you've mentioned that. Great. So we'll get into the Q&A. We've got 2 in the Q&A, but we've got a bunch of questions via chat. So I'm going to go through the 2 that are in the Q&A right now. Then I'm going to scroll all the way up to the top of the chat and then go down in the questions. So first question is from Jorge. Hello, Jorge. Are there any plans to implement an app-based shipping pick list for books or adding photos for listings? This would help our organization tremendously. Most of our eBay listing errors are because of missing photos for the product. So Jake, you may not know the answer to this question, but I'll throw it to you. Otherwise, we'll take this as a feature request if it's not possible right now. What are your thoughts on this, Jake?
So I don't know. I mean, about a separate app for that. I'm not sure if that's. I probably want to get a little more detail, but as far as for adding photos for listings, there might be some options that we have available for you. And so I would say, please call into the customer support, just telling them you're getting a lot of photo issues on eBay, and just ask them, if they can help you help out in that aspect. I don't want to go into too much detail here, but there are some things that we could do that could certainly help out, and the support staff will know what you're talking about and be able to help you out with that. So.
Absolutely. There's a lot of different ways to answer that question, Jorge. Like, for example, with our collectibles software, through the desktop app, you can add photos for listings. So my recommendation would be the same as Jake. Send in a few examples, or call in with a few examples. We'll see how we can help you. And if we don't have that right now, we can add that as a feature request on our feature request board, so our engineers are well aware of it. And from James, hi, Sam. Hi, Jake. Big fan of you both. I'm a big fan of both Sam and Jake as well. What's the best way to avoid orders ending up in that order issues tab? So I might pass, this seems like a software question, so I might pass this one to you as well, Jake.
So ultimately, I mean, if you're going to sell on multiple marketplaces, this is going to happen. I mean, there's nothing you can do to avoid it completely. Some things that you can do to help reduce that is you can have a listing delay on some marketplaces, and then that way it gives you a chance to sell it on one marketplace. If it's an item that's very fast selling on Amazon and they're selling multiple copies every hour, if you can put a listing delay in some of the other markets, then it's going to only be sold on one market during those first 24 hours or 48 hours, and then it can go to the rest of the markets. So you can do a listing delay. You can also take at certain ranks. So the lower the rank, the faster it's selling. So the rank number 1 is the fastest selling item. So some people will take in their, if it's below 50,000 in rank, they may only list it to one marketplace. And then anything over that 50,000, then it goes to multiple marketplaces. So those are a couple things you can do to help reduce that, but you can't completely eliminate that.
Great, thanks for that, Jake. Sam, I'm going to throw a couple of questions for you. We have Teresa in the comments, and I'm not sure how comfortable you are sharing all of this information. So maybe it's passing some of your details on to other folks. Teresa's asking, Sam, does your Goodwill add in packaging costs 25 cents?
When we are analyzing our expenses, yes, we're taking into account, certainly what the postage is, how much we're paying, our carriers for an order. We're taking into account what the packaging cost is. We're taking into account, labor, some little percentage, a penny for the overhead or whatever, all the different things. We're trying to really understand what is our cost, to do business, cost per order. We don't specifically have like 25 cents that we're adding in, as some kind of a surcharge, but we're taking all the, the kind of fulfillment related costs into account when we're trying to analyze what is our margin, in this department, what is our margin or our cost for doing, each of these individual orders that we're processing.
Great. No, that makes total sense. Knowing that bottom line and adding that in. We've got one from Yesenia as well that I feel like would be good for either of you, but specifically you, Sam, because I know you have thoughts on this one. Yesenia has asked, we opened books about 3 years ago and we've never purged our shelves. How often should purges happen?
Yeah, so this is the thing I would say, all of our facilities, whether we're at a Goodwill or not at a Goodwill, they're all different, right? Some of us have, a small square footage to deal with for our storage space. Some have, a ton, and that's awesome. If you've been doing this for 3 years and you've never had to purge, that's terrific. It's probably making a lot of people listening jealous because some people have a much tighter turn. If it's not causing you any kind of like operational delays, there's nothing wrong with keeping a book on the shelf for forever. I would say at a certain point, like in Portland, we've gone back and forth with different philosophies about, well, if we can fit another book on the shelf, why wouldn't we just want to squeeze it on? But as we're listing new product, we need to know what location that's going into. And if it turns out, well, this shelf only has room for 1 book. Oh, and over here, like happy day, this shelf has room for 5 books. It creates a pretty inefficient listing process because we don't have, limitless shelves here or limitless square footage. So we've tried to find a sweet spot, and I've said that, a couple of times. We want our listers to be able to list as efficiently as possible because we see that something in, call it the first month of being live, it's way more likely to sell than it's, if it's been on the shelf for a year. Not that it can't, the stuff can always sell tomorrow, but when we look at our basic sales, it's the first month, and then roughly speaking, it drops. It's about half of that in the second month, and about half of that again in the third month. So we've kind of swung the pendulum, call it a little more like fill the shelves, trying to not purge, really just maximizing our shelf space. But again, it got to be inefficient because we're spending more time on put away and changing locations when we're doing the listing process, rather than being able to list very efficiently, get those things on the shelves, and then drive more sales. So again, all that being said, if you've never had to purge, that's a wonderful problem to have. I also probably would say maybe you should, schedule a call with Jake or somebody on the team to figure out, are you listing enough? Because maybe you're rejecting a higher percentage based on your available inventory, your donation flow, if you're at a Goodwill, your inventory availability, regardless of who you're working for. Because maybe you could be putting more things on the shelves, which would then potentially drive more sales, but you would be purging, more frequently than, kind of never or every 3 years.
Absolutely. There's so many ways to answer that question, isn't there? Because you definitely want folks to be within those revenue generating roles of listing the most. But if that means that there's limited shelf life and you can't put high value items on the shelf, that becomes a problem as well. And maybe you can get some quick wins with sell back your books and using our purge feature. So yeah, really great question, Yesenia, and could open up a can of worms. So we are at time now, but we have several more questions. So my thoughts are to continue with the questions for 5 to 10 minutes. But I know that many of you may have other meetings and stuff. So this recording will be available if your question hasn't been answered yet. Jake and Sam, are you okay to remain here, or do you have other obligations to move to?
Let's do it.
I'm happy to. This is great.
Fabulous. I did put extra time on the calendar just in case this happened, but I just wanted to double check. Great. So David's asked a question for Jake. Is Neatoscan available for iPad?
The desktop management software is on PC only. We have had some people load up like Boot Camp or some of those PC emulators on their Macs, and we've had success. It's not officially supported, but we have had some success doing that and getting it to work. So, that you can go that route if you really need to. Although you can get a fairly cheap laptop, as long as it has a full version of Windows, you can get a fairly cheap laptop probably run it as well. So.
Absolutely. Officially, Neatoscan supports Android and desktop apps, but it is a popular quest to support iOS, and really ironically on the Upright side, because we lead both Upright and Neatoscan, folks from Upright really want Android. So really great feature requests as well. Folks definitely have favorites there in the operating system they like to use. So Tiara has, I'm sorry Tiara if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, has a question that's related to Yesenia's earlier one. How do you determine what books need to be purged? How can I purge the books that are low margin profits? So I might pass this one to you, Jake.
Okay. Sam covered a lot of this, and I think that was a great answer he gave. The one thing I've seen a lot is, the answer is different for everybody. And, like Sam has covered, some people don't need to purge and some people need to purge every week. So it's really kind of finding what's going to be best for your personal business at your location. So I would recommend, give us a call. We'll help you out and decide that. But one of the things that if you want to kind of start tackling it on your own, run an active inventory report that opens up in Excel. And then you can start to kind of sort and filter and see where most of your inventory is. You can see how old it is by the date listed column. You can also see the current sales rank and the price of those items. And so if you know the price of the item, there's a weight on there as well. So you can figure out which items are sitting at your floor that, probably have a less percent chance to sell, because if it's sitting at your floor, it probably means other people are selling it for cheaper than what you're willing to sell it for. So those are some items to target. But we could, with the active inventory, a lot of times we'll say, okay, let's go in and see how many items you have that are 3 years and older. And if that's a reasonable number, then we can just purge those specific numbers, those specific items, and create a pull list, for you to go ahead and get those done. That's something that you mentioned, Lori, is if you're going to be doing purges, so we've integrated Sell Back Your Book into that, so you can actually see if you can sell those before you purge. And if Sell Back Your Book will take them, then it will actually create a pull list like an order. So you can go out and pull all those items. You'll walk in the same path that your warehouse is laid out in, so you're not bouncing back and forth. So it's a really nice process that we've added recently. So, take advantage of that. And if you want to find out a little bit more about how to find out about that feature, just give us a call. I think we have an article somewhere, and we can help you out finding those articles.
One other thing that I would throw in there on that same token is figuring out whatever the age limit is if you're looking to purge, but also figuring out, is there a dollar threshold where you actually want to actively pull that aside? So I'll throw out just an example number. And let's use that extreme of 3 years. Okay, it hasn't sold for 3 years. So maybe it is unlikely to sell tomorrow, even though you never know, it could. But let's say you look at that active inventory list and there are 2 books that are priced at $100 or more. And maybe you'll say, I'm actually going to pull those out and I'll get them relisted into another location. Or maybe I'll have a special, like a high value location. And I'm using that just as a round example number. But if you get a little tighter, let's say you're purging, at a 6-month rotation, but you still want to preserve, I've got a couple of these that are $100, or wherever your threshold is, could be lower, could be higher, again, depending on your inventory and your flow. But in my mind, unless you start to feel like you're hoarding things that are never going to sell, and all of a sudden it's more of like a museum than it is a marketplace that or an operation that you're selling books on, pulling those things aside before you do your purge, and again, just get them relisted into a new location based on your specifics. But I would throw that out there if folks aren't already doing it.
Yeah, that's a really great addition there. We've got a question directly for you, Sam, from Peggy. Sam, explain your strategy of selling on the lower fee platforms for a certain time frame before opening up sales on Amazon, in brackets, where the highest fees live. I love this strategy.
Okay, so I will, although you just said one of the marketplaces, I'll try to protect the innocent or the guilty here. So in Portland, again, we sell on 5 different marketplaces. Jake talked about one strategy, which I think is very viable and should be considered, which is a delay, a listing delay to different marketplaces. I will admit, in Portland, we list to all 5 of these marketplaces at the same time. Doesn't matter if it's one of the faster sellers, meaning lower sales rank, or something a little higher. But we do put a little bit of a price premium on our higher fee marketplaces for the first month. And we split the month into 2 chunks, and we play with this. So you may have already picked this up earlier. We like to adjust things. We like to test things. We like to have a hypothesis and make a change and then, measure the results. So by making these products a little bit more expensive for, again, the first month, but we kind of break that up into first half of that month, maybe, and I'll just use round numbers. These are not the perfect things, but let's say we added $1, to a regular priced item for the first half of the month. And let's say we drop that down to only a 50-cent increase. Our thought and our strategy being, yes, it may prevent sales on those marketplaces. And that's not exactly our intention, unless it then sells on one of the lower fee marketplaces, in which case, okay. But if it does sell on one of those higher fee marketplaces, the fees, even though they are higher, they're coming off of a higher starting point, and it doesn't work out to the penny, but it's a way that we've felt comfortable trying to kind of find that balance, find that sweet spot. And the weird thing I will say is that normally you would expect to see sales start, and then as a product gets older, the sales just go down. But when we see our surcharge, let's call it, disappear, we actually see our sales kick back up, because there are some of these products that maybe we've priced ourselves into a little bit of a non-competitive situation. But then once everything is equal, those sales bounce back up. And then they taper off, kind of that long tail of sales in month 2 and month 3 and month 4, et cetera. So I'm disclosing that. I'm acknowledging it. Peggy's asking the question. She's aware of the fact that we do this strategy. And I'll say again, it is maybe not the strategy that Neatoscan would tell everybody to do, because it is very different from a listing delay. But it's a viable strategy to consider anyway.
Yeah, I love you mentioned that, because what works for one organization can work for multiple or for one. So I love this idea sharing and you being so open with one of your strategies, Sam, and sharing that with everyone. Great. David's asked a question that I'm actually going to answer. He's asked, is there any way that Neatoscan could automate keeping up pricing rules with postage rate increases? That's a really great call out, David, and I love that you brought this up. So one of the things that we're looking at this year is how to automate stuff like that. Now, I'm on the customer end, so I have no idea how long it would take our engineers to develop this if it's technically feasible. And I know a lot of our customers love the autonomy of decision trees. So essentially what I'm saying, it's something we're aware of. It's a really great feature request. And please email me or please email support if you have additional thoughts in this automation of pricing rules, especially with regards to postage rate increases or anything else. But it's not something that I'm going to promise that can happen publicly just because I'm not involved in that technical scope. And I can't speak for what's possible, but please share your ideas so I can pass them on to the folks that are looking at how we integrate that within our software. Great. And are there any other questions? It looks like we do have one that's just directly to hosts and panelists, and I'll follow up with you by email afterwards, Shane. It's a specific feature request. And can anyone else see any questions that have been left unanswered? Otherwise, I think we'll call it a day. All right. So thank you all so much for joining us today. All of our contact details are up on the screen here. There were loads of questions. So if you're hungry for more information, definitely recommend reaching out to myself or Jake if you have any suggestions or any thoughts with regards to the Neatoscan software. Jake is going to be your best contact, or anyone on the support team, when it comes to understanding the different marketplaces and how to adjust that decision tree and a lot of the questions that you've asked today. For Goodwill's looking to implement Goodwill Books, I definitely recommend you reaching out to Sam Thompson. Also, as I mentioned earlier, their operation is just absolutely stand out. So I'm sure if Sam's open to it, he'd be able to give you some top tips on what they do. But I know that they've already shared a lot of their tips today as well. So any final comments from Sam or Jake before we stop the webinar here today?
I want to say thanks for the opportunity, and I would echo, I'm happy to talk about e-commerce and ebooks anytime. So please take advantage of the contact info there and reach out if you'd like. Excellent. Thanks everyone so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you all coming here today, and we'll look forward to see you in the next masterclass in April. Bye.